Here we go. Fine Line Fridays, Will Riley, and I got Chad Westbrook. Chad, how you doing today?
Yo, yo, happy Friday. I'm good. I'm good. I'm ready to do this.
Absolutely. I'm excited for this. And each time we get together, we get to kind of really dive deep into a certain topic. And we pick these topics that hopefully are really relevant and we can unpack them and have some really good discussion based on what Chad's seeing in the industry, based on what I'm seeing in the industry, and ultimately where we both come from. This topic is really about identity, specifically the service identity. And I've got some directions that I'd like to take this and get your thoughts too. And I'm sure you've got some directions that you would like to take this. But I'll start off with really diving deeper into what it means to have a service identity. And I'm coming from a place where I left the software side and I went to go work for a roofing contractor who had been around for 12, 13 years. But there was six sales reps that were all 100% compensated based on the next re-roof that they sold. So how do you convert that company, that culture into a service leading organization? And along the way, it really clicked in my head because I didn't know going in what our identity would be on the service side, but we discovered that as a team, and it was really cool to figure out our why, because I think that's ultimately what it boils down to. And you talk a lot about culture, but when you hear the word or the topic service identity, what comes to mind from your side?
A hot mess. A hot mess of the people that you have hired, right? And all of the different paths that they have, because that's what creates. So we talk about culture, right? Culture identity. Culture is created by the people that you have in your organization. You can say, as a leader, you can say whatever you want to say. That doesn't make a difference because as soon as they go inside the field, right, it's safety, guys. Guess what? You want a hard hat on 100% of the time, right? And then what happens when it's 110 degrees inside Dallas? They're up on a roof, hard hat comes off, right? And like that's an identity. That's when I think about identity and you talked about it, like safety, right? Are you a safety first company? And that has to start with the people. So I know I'm going deep into this already, but like I love this topic because you are what your employees make it and you can influence it. But the identity, I think, and your why, like that's huge because that's what's going to make one company different than the other. So I'm excited about this.
For sure. And you hit on a couple of pieces there too, that it boils down deep into the why. And I feel like if you're a roofing contractor and you want to offer service, we talked about this before, why even do it? Well, there's a lot of attraction to implementing a service department. But as you start to actually put it to action, the identity comes forth on its own. And it's a culmination of all these contributions and people and how they interact with customers. And in the beginning, it's kind of like, all right, we want to offer service. We don't know what it's going to look like exactly. I have an idea, but unless you get everybody to embody that culture, the why, it's not really going to prevail. So one thing I want to kind of touch on a little bit is it takes a long time. It takes a team effort over a long period of time. It doesn't happen overnight. And I'm speaking on behalf of implementing a service division, but it happens over a long period of time, especially starting with nothing. And in the beginning, it's a lot of culture shock. And you've gone into different organizations and said, look, we're changing. No one likes change. Maybe
Yeah,
you
it's
can
hard.
speak a little bit to the very early stages of change in a service model. What have you seen?
So I think you said it best, right? If you don't understand why it's not, let me rephrase that. If your employees don't understand why you're doing something, that's where it goes off the rails. That's where it starts to go off the rails, right? Because like, oh man, and I say this because I've been in this world. Oh man, the owner's onto something new. Oh man, we're doing service this week, and like that right there, I've been in the middle of those conversations. Instantly show the identity, and this is beyond service, right? This is as a company to be able to say that's how the employees see the culture, and that's how they're going to react to it. That's how they're going to buy into it, and or not buy into it. I think that's the most important part. Why are you doing it? And it's not you knowing it, it's your employees knowing it. Because that's when you're going to get buy-in. That's when you're going to start building that identity, right? Of who are we? Why are we here? Um, so far that we can go into this, but it's got to start at the top 100%. It's got to be consistent. The second thing is your employees have to know it and they have to believe it. That's a huge part. They have to believe why you're saying it because, again, we can talk in meetings all day long about culture and core values and whatever other words you want to use for it. But if it doesn't leave that office, if you don't see it being executed by the people, the identity might not be what you think it is.
Oh, 100%. And it reaches that tipping point where you've got the majority that now understands or embraces that why. And for me, and I guess from what I see too, but for me in that roofing company, the tipping point was when the reps actually took a step back and stopped looking at roofs as I'm quoting a roof replacement. When they took a step back and they gathered other options and then they sat down with the client and they reviewed those options, that once the client told the sales rep, that almost confirmed the why we're doing, that they now had buy-in. And then when that transpired to another rep and to another rep, and then we had 3 reps out of 6 that were like, the light bulb goes off. That for us was the tipping point. And I see this with other organizations too, where okay, we have some buy-in. Maybe that buy-in is hard to get. Maybe it's easy to get. But to me, that's the tipping point.
I think that yes, 100%. Because as change happens, you said it right. Change is hard. Change is difficult. It's you talk about being in the zone or just flowing, right? That's habit. Habit is showing up every day and checking your email as soon as you get inside the office. That's easy. What if I told you you didn't have to check or I didn't want you had to do something else? It becomes difficult because now you're trying to break it. So you talked about like just that one person. If you just take one person within the company and just say, hey, I want to try something with you. Would you be open to it? And then if you can show success, right? Show what we're trying to achieve. Yeah, that's a massive tipping point to be able to say this is no longer theory. This is real because Joe's doing it.
Yeah. It's funny. I had a rep call me. This is from back from the roofing company. He lives an hour north of me. Quincy was talking about buying property up there. I'm like, oh, I know someone in Huntsville. So I called James and I'm like, hey, let's catch up. And he told me he's still at the same company, but he told me he wishes and thinks back to the days where we were still there. Me and Dustin were still there. And he's like, it was so great then. And that was a year of fighting with him to get him to do things differently, right? Fast forward another 5 years, and now he's got extra layers to what he has to deal with every day. But just to go back to the simplicity of him getting on and off roofs, caring for customers, retaining those customers, he still has the same customers. He's got a 10 to $15 million book of business right now that all culminated from what we implemented back then. That's really cool.
Yes. That to me is the definition of success, right? And that's a personal thing, my why, right? I'm here because when I step out of a situation and it continues to be able to run without me, that's my personal definition of success, right? And whether that be a manager, a leader, C-suite, or even doing what I do now, that's my goal of success. But that's the identity, right? That's the identity I want, is that when I step into a meeting, I'm valuable. Now, transfer that into service. What are you guys trying to do? Are you guys trying to stop roof leaks? Are you trying to help clients better spend their money, right? They have money. Are you helping them better run their business? Because there's a completely different aspect and culture for people who are trying to help customers run their business to people who are help customers trying to spend their money. Two different worlds, two different approaches, two different ways of how you look at possibly what's the same data, but how it's used and the actions that are behind that.
No question. Just kind of go back to the discovery of your identity in general. At least for us, it was this realization that we all understand our messaging and we all know how to, we talk about elevator pitches, right? And I always tried or strived to get to the position where anyone that answered the phone in our roofing company could deliver the same message. I don't care if you were a superintendent, an estimator, or answering the front desk, that we all gave a unifying message. And that's difficult too. You can call into production and get a different attitude, a different message versus calling a sales rep versus calling someone in customer service. But as we discovered that why, we were truly there to manage the entire lifespan of our clients' roofing systems. It wasn't to sell a large project or recoat or replace or even service. It was to come in, work shoulder to shoulder with the customer, gather their data, and then help them manage their data. And it was just really cool. You talked about earlier, like your impact in the industry. And it's really great to get a call from a rep 5 years later, and they're like, man, I really appreciate what you did back then. I didn't know it then. I fought it, but the impact that lives on afterward, that's really cool.
I'd like to share one, if you're cool with it. I'd like to share one for me that still sits with me today. Cool
Yeah.
with that? To deliver peace of mind. And when I joined that culture, when I joined that company, I didn't understand it. I didn't get it, right? It was something that you said, and it might be written on the wall or it might be on some of our marketing material. But the part that came from it is that we applied it in every single part of our business, that we were there to deliver peace of mind. And that didn't matter if I was working with accounting, it didn't matter if I was working with sales, it didn't matter if I was working with my customer. It was anybody that we interacted with. We did not leave that until they had peace of mind. And the coolest part that still sat to me is it had nothing to do with what I was doing, what I was selling, the products I have, the services I delivered, nothing. It had everything to do with what that customer was trying to achieve, right? Like you asked, or you said a few minutes ago, right? It's like, sit down, ask the question of their why, right? Why is the customer buying this, right? Like that went so deep, and it still hits me today that did I deliver peace of mind, right? Are you happy with the conversation that we're having? Are you going to be able to go to sleep tonight and not think about this? To
Yeah.
me,
Because it's
that's
bigger.
a huge, huge part of, internal, external, wherever it is. That's one thing that stuck with me. And I would say that was an identity that was within that organization.
And it's amazing to have that be
Yeah.
embraced by not only you, but by the team, because it's almost like a higher purpose that we all truly believe in our why, whatever that is for your company, and however you arrive at discovering your why. But it's just a really cool thing to be a part of because, as you're mentioning earlier, culture is everything. And you reach a point where you're almost like scared to bring anybody else in because you don't want to disrupt that culture, and how can you best preserve that, especially if you want to grow? It's always been the challenge, and you've gone from one truck to two truck to three trucks, and you know what the impact that has on total sales. How do you
Mhm.
preserve that ecosystem?
So, a couple things that I've learned. And first off, talking about peace of mind and that, I was part of the leadership team. And that is the hardest thing that you ever have to do with the leadership. And to be able to roll it down is to be able to make sure that everything you do revolves around those core values or that purpose. Insanely hard. At no point, don't ever make you guys think that this was easy. It was not. Every conversation I had for every upset individual, whether it was on my team, it was a customer, it was someone else, it went back to that question: did you deliver peace of mind? If the answer was no, we have more work to do. That was constant. That was every day. I probably said it 50 times, but like that's how you start to identify, right? And then when it's the person that reports to me, right, starts saying it to their employees, and then that's how you build it. But the one thing that you asked, I think that is insanely important, is how do you preserve that? Because the other thing I learned a lot about culture is that every time you bring one person into your company, I don't care if you have 10 people, 100 people, or 1,000 people, that culture resets instantly. Because one bad person can create a train wreck of actions after that. And I'm sure we can all think of a job that we loved, a position that we loved, an action that we loved, and then someone else came into the mix and you no longer loved it as much. Man, they're destroying what we had, right? They're changing what we had. They don't understand what we're doing. whatever, if it's any of those things, if you guys have said that inside your head, said it out loud, said it to a coworker, that is change. Okay. And it might be change for good, it might be change for bad. But when you start figuring out what your why is, you have to protect it. You have to protect it. So, like, hiring is so important that when someone comes in, they understand we operate with a purpose of blah, right? And that was my job as a leadership side to be able to say, I want you to understand that when you come into our company, into our division, we're here to deliver peace of mind. And you're probably going to hear me say that a lot, right? I would prep them. That's what we're here to. So if you're upsetting somebody, it's not that everyone's going to be happy. It's that everybody has peace of mind at the end of the conversation. They heard, you were heard. You might not be on the same end, but like that to me was the biggest, I said the two biggest things that I learned. Number one, someone new into a company, even one person can destroy a culture if you do it wrong. The other part is that leadership has to continue to be able to operate with whatever that is. And I don't care if it's service leadership, business, operations, doesn't make a difference. Those have to be your drivers and they have to be protecting it.
Every day. And it's never done, right? To your point, it's a continuous effort. It's always training and training and training and retraining. But we experienced a lot too of change. Even, you're talking kind of big picture company wide culture, and that stems into the subsets or the departments of the company. In the service side, we had, as we cycled through certain people, that risk, that level of risk. When you brought in a tech that worked at CentiMark for 25 years and had all this experience and tried to bring in kind of some things that CentiMark did, for example, or a rep that or a service tech that's been doing it for 35 years and he knows everything. As you bring that into your ecosystem, you run a level of risk. So what we worked so hard to do is to preserve that by saying, look, before we even send you out in a truck, you're going to come in and you're going to understand our why, understand our culture, right? And then agree with that. And then you can start to be, dip your toe in the water, right? And start to team up with certain service technicians until that, because we wanted to protect the culture, literally at all costs. Kerwin Ray always says this too. You hire slow and you fire fast. He often talks about the kombucha, right? One little fruit fly that gets in there and just spoils the whole bunch. But as we went from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 plus trucks, that became a higher level of risk to maintain our why. And we needed to take care of customers. We needed to put them first because that's what just came first.
Yes, yes, and yes. And I'm going to say this, and I'm sorry to be direct to everybody that's listening, but what you explained, I was this person. They came from CentiMark. They've been inside a truck for 10 years. They know exactly what they're doing. So we're just going to put them in a truck and just let them go. That's being lazy. That's not protecting your culture. That is what you said. That's risk, right? Because you're taking his entire, his, her, whoever, their entire existence of what they have learned, right? And you're now putting it in to possibly create havoc within your service identity, right? Because maybe you guys do things a certain way. I've been on companies, they say they water test everything. I'm not going to challenge if that's right or wrong. That's your guys' identity. Can that identity change? Sure. Right? Should it change? I don't know. You guys tell me. Is it working? But like something like that, right? It's like, oh, no. You bring someone in. It's like, no, we water test everything. And now you send this guy on his own. He's taking 4 times as long on every single ticket because he's water testing everything because that's what he knew. So I loved when you would do that because I know we always talked about that you would bring someone in and they had to live that life. They had to understand what it was because it's so easy to judge somebody else on what they are or are not doing based upon perception. That's the biggest thing.
We called it the DK
Yeah.
way, right? And it was like our way. And before you even went out on any job or looked at any roof, you had to learn the DK way. And then you kind of were implemented into the waters. And we didn't get it perfect, right? We certainly made a ton of mistakes. So, to your earlier point, it is a grind. It is a challenge to protect that culture. But the few mistakes that we did make is just putting them right out there. And habits spread. Certain things spread that you had no idea was even spreading. And how do you mitigate that? Well, you got to put the time in up front.
There's so much to that. And I guess the one thing that I always say is that whatever we plan, it's going to be wrong. Be okay with it. Whatever you do, you're going to screw up. Be okay with it. The biggest thing that I can say that my employees have expected from me was to be human. And I say, guys, I messed up. I admit it. I'm okay with that because I'm trying new stuff just as they are because we're trying to make small tweaks to our business. We're trying to make it better. Another thing that I've done that help keep service identity is SWOTs. So strength, weakness, opportunities, threats. Tons of different ways to be able to do it, but it's 4 questions that you ask your team, and they do it anonymously. What are the strengths that the companies have, or that the company has that we should focus on? What are the weaknesses that we should try to fix? What are the opportunities that we should take advantage of? What are the threats that we need to protect ourselves from? And most of the time, the best answers that I got were from my field guys. Not what I saw from the top looking down, but from what my field guys saw, right? From their perspective, right? I have to wait too long because the stores are never open when I show up. We don't have the materials that we need inside the shop, so I constantly have to run to wherever it is. That's identity, guys. There's a massive identity to all of our materials are in this bay. This is where we get them, and we restock our truck every Monday, making it up, right? But like, that's part of an identity.
It is. It is. And it's different too because you have your internal identity that your employees all see they're a part of, they help culminate. And then you have your external identity. How do your customers view you? And it could be, a magnet on the side of a pickup truck kind of, image, or it's your guys show up, they're clean, they have a uniform, they're respectful, they're to the point, they get their job done, they come in, they make you feel safe, right? So what is that all like? Sit in your customer's position and then try to observe what your identity is too. They're 2 different ones. Would you agree with that? They're 2 different identities. And how do you pull them together?
1000%. Nobody, and this is me shifting to the customer side, no one cares what you do internally. Nobody cares if you get all your materials from the shop or if you have to drive to a supply house to get it. Nobody cares. So when you start looking at the business that way, right? How does your customer see your business? I did a time to value. I did a H2 kickoff recently with a company I work with, and we did a time to value training where we look at what our customer sees. So a customer calls and says, hey, I need a quote on a project. I'm going to make this short and sweet from what it was. And I say, okay, no problem. Within, let's just say 3 or 4 days, someone shows up, does the survey, right? Takes the information, do the site bid. Cool. Takes us 3 days to be able to price it. Then it maybe takes a couple days to be able to get back to deliver to the customer. Now the real question, how long does it take for the customer to award it after you deliver it to them? Let's say 2 weeks. Round number, we're at 3 weeks to a month before your customer gets any value from placing that phone call to you. That's massive. 3 weeks to a month of dealing with the roof leak for whatever disruptions in the building. So that's a huge part, like you're saying, right? What is my customer facing identity? Because if you were to go out there on, let's just say, time and material, you probably could have been out there in 3 days and had value in 3 days, not 3 weeks. What's the identity that you have? And that goes back to your sales reps, right? You're talking about the sales reps only focus on re-roofs. Well, every single re-roof is probably being done because there's some type of service or some type of leak issue that's forcing them to be able to do it, or tolerance that they hit, right? Like, this whole thing is a big ecosystem if everybody looks at the business from the same scope. So you're right. A lot of times I am thinking high level, but customer side, nobody cares about what happens internal. They care about their problem, right? And getting their problem solved, and how well can you guys help them? So that's a
Yeah.
really, really cool thing to dissect.
You were at that one, and this reminded me or made a correlation to, you were at that one Duralast conference when John Foley spoke, right? The Blue Angels
Glad to be
leader.
here.
Yeah, glad to be here. That really helped put a stamp on our culture, our why. But he puts it in these terms of, so everyone knows, Blue Angels is the group of 6 pilots, the top 10th, the 1/10, the 1/10%. I think that's what it's called. But like, there's a line of pilots waiting to just be one of the 6 that participate in the show. And the amount of effort that these 6 pilots put into the preparation. I mean, their lives are in each other's hands because they all fly 6 inches, hundreds of miles per hour, just to perform at the show. But he puts it into a good reference point because all of this work that goes into this performance to put on a show for the people, right? And it's all revolving around that center point. So for a roofing contractor, that's a job, a service job, a roof replacement, all the planning, all the preparation that goes into getting that job. And then what does your customer see? Well, where do they put the materials? Where are they parking? How are they treating our people? Are they being loud? Right? It's all revolving around that show. And it has to all, everyone has to do their part. To your point, sales rep who sold it needs to sell it a certain way. The estimator needs to estimate it the correct way. Production needs to perform it to the standards that we estimated it to be at. So we come in on time and under budget, hopefully. But the customer and what they witness is the show. I just thought it was cool. That was like my favorite conference that I've probably ever been to when he spoke.
100%. Agreed. And I still talk to the individuals that I joined that conference with specifically about that. That was extremely motivational. But you're absolutely right. Because all the training that they put in, right? All the different things that they do all come down to that 30-minute show that they have, right? Or whatever the duration of their show is. It's no different with us. Now, theirs is life and death, right? And he talked about that. He messes up, someone dies, right? We mess up, nobody dies, right? We might lose a couple percents on our gross margin. But at the end of the day, it all comes down to that. Because you're right. What you're talking about is how the customer sees us. Have I ever had a truck park inside a handicap spot and disrupt the store? Absolutely, right? Have I ever had my truck unload all of the garbage that they had from the week in the parking lot of the customer that we're currently doing work on? Absolutely, right? All of this different stuff that happens all comes down to how our customer sees us. Because when someone talks about your business, they're going to say, yeah, he parked in the handicap zone. Then he unloaded half of his garbage into my parking lot, taking up another stall, set the ladder up directly over the bay so I couldn't even use my bay. I had to ask him to move his ladder, and then it took him 20 minutes to do it. All of that is the training that you guys do back in-house. All of that is the identity that you have for the one time that you have to perform for the customer to love doing business with you enough to do it again.
And that's well put. I think that's a really great place to conclude. And I'll say this too for everyone that is watching. I challenge you to discover what your why is and to embrace that. Participate in, some certain keynotes and extract what you can from the industry. It's not just one, we do service and that's our identity. There's so much that goes into it. There's a million plus combinations of what equals your identity. But this was a really fun one for me, and I really enjoy these, Chad. So I appreciate you spending the time with me every Friday.
I love it. I'm going to give a challenge to everybody who listens to this. I don't care what your position is, write down, if you don't have, I'm going to go there. If you don't have something, okay, that clearly defines exactly what is your identity, what is your purpose, write it down and share it with your team. See if they agree. Because that's the first part of alignment side here, is to be able to make sure everybody sees it the same way. Because if you don't, that's just like hiring the Cinemark guy. I do service great. Well, no, I do service great. I do service great. What is it that makes you guys unique? What's your identity? Write it down. Just share it with your team and be humble enough to get feedback to be able to say, yeah, I agree with that, or no, I don't. Because that's the first step to defining what that identity is. You already have it. It already exists. You already have people, right? Those people already work together. That identity is already there. Take it, write it down, share it with the team, see how aligned you are with the rest of the team. That'll be fun.
Totally love it. All right,
Cool.
rock on, y'all. We'll catch you next time.
See ya.
See you.